And welcome back to the bottom.
Ew, I'm logging off. This is goodbye.
Welcome back to welcome back to the Bottomless podcast. That is spelled BTTMLESS podcast. Thank you for joining us. If you're a return listener, welcome back, family. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. We hope you stick around. We're just three brown friends talking about random, normal-ass subject matters that interest us or pertain to our lives in our waning 20s, which I'm currently going to leave Vince and Leslie in their waning 20s this year. Turn 30. Holla. So to get into introductions, my name is Kevin, and these two beautiful people that are with me are
Leslie
and Vince.
And we are three brown friends who are just doing a podcast. I reside in Floribama, Leslie resides in Hawaii, and Vince resides in California.
Not
these DJ effects.
Oh, sorry.
Nah, go off.
Kevin, what's the worst, cringiest thing you've ever done in a professional setting?
Okay, so I can say this. When I was working at Grace College of Divinity in Fayetteville, North Carolina, we were trying to switch email servers. So we had a .org. We wanted to go to .edu. But I forgot the transition, but you couldn't just switch. You had to delete everyone's .org, save the content, and then go and make edu and upload. So like I'm corresponding with Google and I'm like emailing them like, is there a way I can like cloud this data? And they're like, you literally would have to create a whole different like a .com or a something. Like switch and it's created, switch everyone's .org to whatever the .com was. And then when you create the .e, so like I'm sitting there in this dark office, turn on my lights. I was miserable for like hours, for several days. I'm working on this. And then like, basically I for like 3 days, the students couldn't eat, like homework assignment. So there was like you had students like freaking the fuck out, and I did all this and literally none of it worked. Like I switched them. I wasn't able to upload their data to the .com, the interim before the edu. So it didn't work. We had to like create the edu. They had to like personally migrate their content or just save the .org. Like, but we were just sitting there and I was like, yeah, I got it. And I was like talking to Google, not like emailing Google, corresponding, like, how do you, and what's funny is everyone who's listening to this, who uses this function can now personally thank me. Google has a feature now, basically what I needed, to where you needed to like transfer. If you have a .org and you need to switch to a .edu with Google or a .com with Google, they have a feature now where you can you can transfer the content. You click a button, they transfer your content. They didn't have that before I requested it. I'm pretty sure some big company asked for it, and that's not me. But I'm taking personal responsibility for Google creating the feature where you can migrate your data in the click of a button. So yeah, like students like college
got hired by Google.
Mind you, college, because think about it. I'm personally changing every account for 200 students. I would have to re-give them passwords. So like for 3-4 days, imagine you're in class, you got to turn in assignments, you got due dates. No one can correspond with anyone, teachers, professors, student to student, student to faculty. Like everything's dark because Kevin's in the office fucking her. I'm like, yeah, no, I got this. Because I was too embarrassed to admit that I couldn't handle it. I was like, no, I'll figure it out. And it was a total fuck up. It was the worst day of my, it was one of the worst days of my life.
Hilarious.
Did you get in trouble?
No, because like my boss understood, and it was something he understood that like, I don't think this is like something that's going to be easy or smooth. Usually you would pay a company to come in and do that, or you would offset that utility to an outside contract company. So he reproached me with it, like, Kevin, I need you to see if you can do this. I need you to see. So he had a lot of mercy and space and room of like, hey, I'm not gonna put a timeline on you. I need you to tell me if you can do it, and then just keep me updated as you go along. So like he had a lot of space for me to like mistake and fuck up.
Well, I have two options for mine. One is like genuinely pretty embarrassing, and one's more just like a relatable, like mistake? Which one should we go with?
Both, because I'm still racking my
Which was the
brain.
most embarrassing?
Okay, the more embarrassing one was like at some point a couple months after I started at my current job, I went to this and it actually, yeah, it was a couple months after I started, which was around when COVID hit. Like I started in November and then COVID hit in March. But it was soon after COVID had hit and we were doing a lot of partnering stuff and meeting a lot of new people. And at one point I had gone to this space where there was like a new partnership happening and like met somebody who I didn't know who they were. And so I was just super like treating everybody the same way, you know. I was like, hey, da, 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 and kind of, you know, just a little bit taking charge. Like that was kind of my role. And not that I would have treated this person so differently if I knew who they were, but later I found out like they were like in government, like kind of like just people, like most people knew who he was. And I had just been very much like just thought it was like a volunteer or something. And so I've been like giving them tasks and stuff. But
Not telling them what to do.
so embarrassing.
Not the vice president was with Leslie. She's ordering.
She was talking to Mike Pence, and she's like, "Yeah, so I need you to pick these up."
Can you grab me some plastic cups from the storage room?
It was kind of like that. But I mean, I wasn't like rude or anything, but you know. But then what made it so much worse was that we had to text a little bit to like get something figured out after the fact, and like. And this was in a phase where I was like, yeah, like time to start being a little more open to things and whatnot. And I felt like a little vibes. And so I was like, oh, and I was telling there was a little vibes. And I was telling my siblings about it. And I was just going to completely drop it. I was more just like, oh, like this. And I might be totally wrong, you know, da da da. But then my brother was like, well, what's he look like? What's he look like? Let's see a picture. And so like I found a picture and texted it to my brother, but then I had actually texted it to the guy. Like it was a screenshot. And it was after we had just started to figure out like something for this like new partnership. And I was like, oh
no. Let me tell you something. Let me what Leslie just said. I don't care what Vince's story is or what my story was. The hallmark embarrassment of our generation is to send a message about someone accidentally to the person you're talking about, because you cannot. It's the most cringy, hair-raising, because you can't explain yourself because they know now that you were talking about them to like.
And it was so obvious too, because it was literally just like a screenshot of a Google search. Like it was just so embarrassing. And so then I tried to recover. I actually just tried to like be super truthful, and I was like, yeah, I just want to let you know, like I really admire your work and I looked you up, and which was true. And like he never replied, and since that day I like we've done other little things with him, but it's never been me.
And the boss is like, Leslie is not playing point on this one, guys. I know what I said.
Anyway, so beat that, Vincent.
I don't think I've had any good story gaffes. Like I can't think of
really
any. Like,
even working at Facebook where everyone's so like high achieving, I assume, and
no, I mean I could definitely get like just random mistakes, nothing that I would call like a gaff. Not yet.
Well, congratulations.
I'm about to say, lucky you son of a bitch.
I really don't think I have. No, I mean again, I could think of like many a mistake where that was really stressful.
Piero's World Cafe, like what? I mean, you might have.
What about just like a nice solid mistake?
I mean, there's plenty of those to pick from. Pick a job. I don't know. We can go down the list. Like I remember one time I got cursed out, as close as I could get cursed out in a professional setting, by my boss at Ring/Amazon when she like told me not to do something ever again, and then 30 minutes later I did it again. It was like a scheduling thing, and I like scheduled it inappropriately, formatted it inappropriately. She's like, "Yeah, don't do this ever again." I was like, "Yeah, I got you." And then like I did it literally 30 minutes later.
Without meaning to?
I was like, so am I fired? Yeah, without meaning to. I think I had already like been in process of doing it, and I just completed it after she gave me that advice. But I didn't go back and like fix anything. And she was like, seriously, again? And I was like, sorry. I don't know, no gaffes. If you're listening and you can think of a gaffe that I've done, please let us know.
Someone get.
I was just gonna say a handful of your coworkers follow Bottomless, right?
Yeah, I was about to say. Everyone
mostly from Facebook, and I don't think if I have had a gaffe, it hasn't been at Facebook, to my knowledge.
Let's wait for the comment section. Let's see.
Sound off below.
I'll Venmo $5 for every story someone has of Vince.
Shit,
At
I'll Venmo $5 too. Piero's no gaffes. I mean, like mistakes, like order messes up here and there. But I've watched a lot of gaffes. I've seen people drop whole like trays of food back onto the chefs, shit like that. I never did. Thank God. Never spilled a drink. Thank God. Oh, Leslie, you served. Did you ever spill anything on anyone?
I don't think I ever spilled on anybody, but I think one time I got somebody's order wrong and they just like yelled at me like the middle of the restaurant, were like super mean and like, yeah. So it was more so a gaff on their part. Like it was, yeah.
Respect,
there's so many bad stories from the service industry that
that's a whole episode in itself.
Yeah. But we're talking about workplace stuff because we thought it'd be cool to revisit and kind of extend or narrow into something we talked about in season 1, which was our ideas about like performance and success. And so yeah, we thought that it would be cool to like talk about ideas right now surrounding career. And I, for one, am excited to listen back to this like in a year and then like 5 years.
Yeah.
But I thought it'd be cool, like, what's the biggest things that like stuck out to us from our performance and success episode without putting too much thought into it? Like, I feel like when I think of what we arrived at, what stands out is us talking about the way that like the school system isn't really conducive to our ideas of success because it's like so narrow and has such a restrictive way of like measuring success and aptitude in different areas. And then I feel like we arrived at some really good gems toward the end about not just like what we didn't like about the current system, but then like things we do value in terms of success. Do you guys remember like some of those things from the end of that episode?
One theme, I don't know if it was just from the end, but one thing that stuck out, and in contrast to where I am, like it's only 6 months ago maybe, but today is like how much like of like respect of me and like my legacy. And I feel like Kevin said something similar, and I Leslie might have said something comparable, but that was like a big thing that surfaced when we defined success in our own terms. Just like that respect from the people around you, which was interesting to think back.
I don't really remember that.
You know, like respecting us and then like having a legacy, which I think in itself is like having a legacy worth respecting, worth remembering, which is interesting because I think if I were to think broadly success, I probably wouldn't come to those places as like first.
Now?
Now. With
a changed man.
I'm a changed man with some life changes. Yeah. So I think it's interesting. I mean, I still obviously, I want to be respected. It bothers me to not be respected, I'm sure, but yeah.
Yeah, you were hitting on something now I remember is I think all of us sort of said something along the lines of like, in terms of legacy, a big important thing is just the legacy you leave with like the people who know you, right? Like the people around you, like toward at the end, like the people who know you best, like having respect for you and like that you basically lived like a full life, like in those terms of positive impact with those around you. Yeah. Well, how did we all end up where we are now? Like between internal desires and thinking that way, and then also just maybe external factors that ended up moving us into our current lanes. Like, Kevin, when did you actually even join the Air Force? I don't think I've actually heard the story of like, I've heard you say a lot about your feelings on being there, like how you can't wait to get out, but like what ended up pushing you in the door?
Sergeant Anderson, if you're hearing this. So I was stuck in Fayetteville working at GCD. Wasn't like a stuck feeling, but being in Fayetteville was a stuck feeling. My mom my whole life kept telling me military because of my father, who was former Army. I told myself I would never go. And then I want to say it was 3 significant things that happened that made me like a light switch. So the first one was David Choi was it sounds so bad. David
Shout
Choi.
out David Choi from
David-
one of our
David-
episodes this season.
David Choi. Man, I don't even know if I can say this, but whatever. David Choi was working a government contracting job on Fort Bragg, and part of the job was helping with alcohol addiction or just addiction in general with that community. And so they had been doing this approach that was like a series of questions. He did that on me about, and I think I chose the subject matter of the military to discuss. It was like a very pointed way of approaching the discussion and the testing. So like he treated me like a guinea pig. I did the testing, spoke of the military theoretically. A couple days later, and in the meantime, my mom is filling my head with the job that I'm doing now and talking about how it's so different from your orthodox military career, and you're more kind of more like a civilian. There's just it's not as, it's not what you think. So David Choi's questioning, my mom in the background filling my head. I was driving to Charlotte, North Carolina to an IKEA to buy furniture for my office at GCD. And to all the Christians out there, I felt an undeniable, like, it was a 3-hour car drive. And if you ever drive from Fayetteville to IKEA, those back roads to Charlotte are like, it's different from like when you're going to Raleigh or South Carolina. I felt an undeniable sensate, like a tangible sensate, like if you're an artist or a Christian or just someone who's like very intuitive or sensitive to like energy and the atmosphere and things like that, like gut instinct, like birds feeling a tornado or a hurricane, like animals feeling an earthquake, about like that kind of you need to go. And I remember telling myself in that era of life, and no disrespect to anyone who scoops guacamole at Chipotle, I told myself, I don't want to be a 32, 33-year-old scooping guacamole at Chipotle in Fayetteville, North Carolina. If you do that, no disrespect, from my trajectory, from my path, I felt a responsibility to things that if I were to find myself at 32, 33, scooping guacamole at Chipotle, something was going to be horrifically wrong in my internal space. So that's what happened. My mom had been badgering me for a long time to figure out something beyond the job I had been doing. I literally came back from IKEA, put the furniture in my office, drove home, walked in. Literally the first moment I walked into my house, I said, Dad, where's my birth certificate and my social security card? I'm going to the recruiter's office tomorrow. And
And I'm sure your mom was just like burst into song.
So here's the thing. Here's the thing. My mom was still on her way home from work. So when she walks in and she sees in the room the safe open to me and my dad, my mom is used to I'm coming home and the cops are bringing me home because I did some stupid shit at home. She's used to me coming home and I had weed on me. My dad was like disciplining me and she goes the fuck off. She's used to coming home, and if we're looking in the security, she's like, I'm sure in her mind I fucked up. So I literally said, like, she's like, what are you doing? I said, I'm looking for my social security card and my birth certificate. She said, why? I was like, because those are documents you need for the recruiter. I'm going tomorrow. And she was like, hey, Leslie, no. She's like, yobo. Like, she's speaking of Korean. Like, get him everything he needs now. Where's the shit? Like, move. Like, start. So yeah, my mom was ecstatic. She made sure I got all my documents, and 4.5 years later, 4.5 years later, here I am.
That's beautiful. You 4.5 years? Huh.
Yeah. You love 0 to 100.
What about you, Leslie? The last time I saw you, you'd already moved because of family, but the last time I saw you was Fayetteville, North Carolina. And I think you've been working, I want to say for like was it a journal or a news agency or like a pub? Like, you've been working in a writing position. I want to say for some kind of like publication or new. And then Vince is like, yeah, Leslie's in Hawaii. I was like, what the fuck is going on? How did she? What is this nomad?
I'm still asking myself the same question.
So my journey took me here because basically, a year after graduating with a fine arts degree, I started working at like the only publishing company in Fayetteville, really, that was I think hiring, or like big enough to be hiring. That puts out like a magazine and like a little newspaper. And yeah, I'd been there, I think 2 years.
Worked her way up.
Yeah.
Up and it's stuck.
and and had decided that it was time to leave, and I knew that when I left I wanted to work in nonprofit. And I've probably mentioned it on this podcast, but a lot of that had been informed by working at that place, because like through that job, even though it wasn't nonprofit, I connected with a lot of like nonprofit people in the community because of the type of features we would do on people like doing good things. It was like a feel good publication, so like usually the type of people that I ended up at their doors was people that like founded a shelter for like people who've experienced abuse 20 years ago, and I had like never heard of it. It's this awesome, amazing place, like pillar in the community. So tons of those experiences, I was just like really inspired, and also really wanting to see like what a model looked like where success was more about community impact than about profit. And so I actually was going to go to Iowa because I had applied to work for a company there and had made it to the final round and was like, oh yeah, I think I'm going to get this. So I was super close. Well, I don't know how close I was to actually getting hired. Maybe I was like way at the bottom of the of the final round, but I really thought that was going to happen. And then I didn't get it. And basically my decision to move to Hawaii without a job, because like I had looked at job prospects there, but everyone kept telling me like you just have to be here because like they won't really consider resumes that have an off-island address. And what pushed me was I was at that time a Christian, and it was a prayer. Like I did ask for a certain sign and then got it and was like, yeah, like I felt that total, like Kevin saying, that total certainty and just like faith and everything. And so, and my family really helped. Like my sister and brother both lived here, and my sister let me live with her for like a month for free while I was job hunting. And yeah, moved out here, worked as a barista for my first couple weeks, and then got my current job at the food rescue nonprofit that has come up. And so I'd say like it was a perfect mix of internal and external, where like I knew where I was wanting to go. And this does end up being like, it is exactly the type of nonprofit I was hoping to work at, even more so than that place I applied to in Iowa, because that place was like really big and corporate. And so I thought it would open a lot of doors. I was like, this would just be good to do. Like in my head, I was thinking like, I'll do it for a year. Having that on my resume would let me work probably a lot of places I'd rather work that are smaller and more like grassroots. But then I ended up getting that type of job here in Hawaii, which was awesome. And the external just being like, family being here and wanting to be near them and having their support to make it possible.
What was, real quick, because to me, if I read someone's story, they say all the shit you just said, and I'm like, if I could touch that one point and throw it into a like a 100-page dissertation, I would. So real quick, I want you to open a little bit. When you were at the place in Fayetteville, and you said a statement, I knew it was time to move on.
Oh, to go, yeah.
What was that extra? Was that external, internal? What was that feeling? What was that? What do you open that phrase up a little bit for me?
That's a really good question and really relevant, I think, to
that's the like that like people there's like people like I think all of us, when we're in the unknown and the mystery and in the frustration of life, and we know we have a tension of where we are now and where we want to be, that feeling of I knew it was time to move on, I think that creates 3-hour conversations till 1 a.m. in a parking lot of a Wendy's between friends. That creates like, those are the kind of conversations that people like, their souls are there's I think everyone can relate to your soul being in turmoil because you have the tension of where you are now is not where you want to be, and you're not yet where you want to get to, where you think you belong. But there's that gut-wrenching, I don't know if it's responsible to take the next step, or I don't even see a next. So that when you say that, it's helpful when other people can look rear view and just explain what that sensation was, to kind of help others look at templates of what other people did and maybe feel more safe and secure of like, hey, it wasn't some big epiphany moment. I just did it. And look, things worked out okay. I'm okay. Life didn't tumble down on me. Like I'm safe. I'm alive. I'm healthy. So what do you mean by I knew it was time to move on?
First off, stop waggling your finger at. No, I'm kidding. Excellent line of questioning though, Kevin. Spot on. You're so right. Like I want to think about those types of pivot points. That's really useful for even thinking about like what comes next, right? Like what pushed me to that point this last time and what could this time. But last time I think it was primarily I knew increasingly that like my values were so unaligned with the owner of the company, like even just the type of stuff he would publish in his like letter from the publisher, like like there's one instance where, and maybe this is too idealistic, but I just straight up refused to edit it. I was like my direct report, I was like, I mean, I'm not gonna edit this. Like, I don't want my hands on any of this. Like, I just so disagree with his viewpoint. So there was that, and then it was also like really frustrating. There were so many things that frustrated me about the way the company went, and I felt so limited, and like I was constantly trying to like pull, but like I felt like so much of my energy was wasted just like pulling, whereas if I was in a more like-minded team and like in a just a more, because I had a good position, like I was in a position, but it was just like the dynamics were not, we weren't aligned well on a lot of our values. So then like so much of the energy just ended up getting wasted on trying to get us, well, what's something we all feel good about, and then what would come out of it was so much less than like what I could envision for what we could do. And so that was frustrating. And I think I was also just in a sense ready to leave Fayetteville as well. Like that wasn't one of the driving things, but yeah, I just felt ready to go to a new environment, and like, yeah. So I think those were the main things. And it was so certain that like I submitted my notice like 3 months in advance, 3 or 4 months in advance. And like, yeah, I was, because I wanted to give time, to find a replacement. I was like, it has to happen. Like, in my mind, it was like at that point, if I hadn't found something else, I would have just worked something to sustain, like a fast food job or something like that to sustain myself. Because I'd rather do that than like stay longer somewhere where I just knew so much like I don't align well with their values and vision. So
yeah.
No,
that's huge.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna get into like like our current generation or our parents being like medicated and depression and unhappiness and like all this crazy shit. But I just want to say like it you kind of just said it casually, but me understanding how I understand how big it is for someone to say it didn't align with my morals and values. And people are like, but Kevin and Leslie, I have a job, I have a house, I have bills, I have family to I have, and it's like, motherfucker, like, yeah, no, like material things. That's gonna, you're going to undervalue your internal state, your moral compass, your ethics. You're going to jeopardize your moral ecosystem because of your fear of, and I get it, some things are just tangible. You have this amount of bills. But it was, I just think it's cool that like at that position, that's not the typical decision someone would make of like, like this doesn't align with who I am internally. And people will usually just stay in that position, become more depressed, become more like they'll just allow the discord to happen. And then it'll lead to like whether mental illness, emotional illness, physical ailment, but they'll stay there thinking that it's okay and they can deal with it. And then eventually they'll just become this like miserable shell of who they were, and it'll change who they are, rather than like taking these scary ass leap to go, no, like my internal state is more important than fucking money and fucking bills. Like I need, if it means taking 2 steps back to wait 3 years to take 1 step forward, but it means my emotional ecosystem is in a better place. Like I'm not about to pollute my shit because of my fear. Like, so that's huge. You kind of just said it casually, but I think it's fucking like colossal that you did that for morals and for values and for internal state.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate that. And I also do, it's not just me saying, I really feel like there's a level of, because of the support I had, right? And like just from right from the start, right? Like how much my parents did to make sure that I'd have opportunities, the support I had literally around me at the time. Like, I don't know if I could say I would definitely have done it that way if I was much tighter. You know what I mean? Like if because of all these benefits I have because of people around me, like
no, for sure.
But yeah. I remember on this topic of big life decisions, I remember when Vincent decided to move out to California.
Worst
And
day of my life.
Vincent,
Worst day.
I'm trying to think, when you moved to California, I think I might have been still in school in Virginia. Because what year did you move?
I moved February 2016.
2016. Okay, yeah. So that was like right before I graduated from undergrad. Because I graduated in May. But yeah, Vincent, you were kind of like, I think the first one out of at least the friend group I was part of. I think some of your dance friends had gone out earlier, but
No, I was the first. I had to get the fuck out, and everyone followed me. Um, yeah, I mean, it's interesting to hear you guys tell yours how like how you got where you are, because I feel like a lot of my movement was not something that I was necessarily cautious of. I feel like
wait, cautious?
or conscious of. Like I
Oh,
feel
okay.
like just like through random experiences, I just naturally started moving into the direction of wanting to
Mm.
live where I live and do what I do. I'm trying to think a good TLDR. It's so non-linear, but also probably not that eventful. So hopefully it's not boring. But shout out to our last episode. Like now that I'm thinking about it, if you were to talk to me at 18 years old, I think I only could have perceived like career goals, like what I want to do, only in the context of the logic of like school and like that performance logic. I don't think I ever was given the space to think about a career in the context of like what would fulfill me, like what I would enjoy, as much as it was what would give me like financial security. Which, to give my parents credit, like they didn't come for financial security, they have it now. So I think it's a pretty rational thing to push for me. But I had no idea what I wanted to do. I don't know how I got to UNCW, but I did. Actually, dance was pretty much the vehicle for all of it. I
Crazy.
didn't know what school to go to. I was stuck between state and UNCW, and I picked UNCW because I liked their dance team better. Sorry, Fusion. At that time, no shade. And then I made connections. Like dance was a very big networking vehicle for me. I made a lot of connections, and I met a lot of people, including people that lived in Los Angeles. So by the time I was getting close to graduation, I had someone that I could stay on their couch, and I don't know. I figured like why not? And then I started to interview with Snapchat while I was still in school. And again, I don't think this was like not very conscious, but it was actually really exciting. More than I thought I would have been excited. Like I was very excited for the interview, very heartbroken when I didn't get the job. But again, I think just dance was the vehicle to move me out to California. And then just Snapchat being my first big boy interview, it was clear that I wanted to move into technology somehow, which given our recent episodes about the internet, it kind of makes sense why that would attract me. And then I just kind of fell into recruiting. Also, when you talk to any recruiter, they never wanted to be a recruiter growing up. So it's like a cliche to ask, and they always say I fell into recruiting. Mine was a little less random because I went to business school for HR, which in some cases recruiting's under the umbrella of human resources. But for real, I just kind of fell into it.
Wait, so okay, in the same vein as Kevin quickly hitting on the touch point in my story, like I feel like for you, is it just that you were casting out a bunch of seeds and then because you got an interview with Snapchat, then that like awakened that hunger in you to work for a more, a big name in the game of tech company like that? Or had you already sort of been thinking, no, if I'm going to do it, I want to work at like the biggest companies, because I think for me, that was like, it wasn't even a surprising turn, but like it started happening, right? Where like, yeah, like when you're working for like Ring/Amazon, it was like, oh, like now, I have a friend who's working for this like massive company. And then obviously when you started working at Facebook, but like, yeah, was that it awakened a desire in you when you got that first interview, or was it already something you had your sights on as part of what would be interesting to you about like growing professionally?
I think I probably just threw a bunch of seeds out. And then when I got a response, I think it just awakened a new possibility of like what my career could look like. I don't think, again, because I wasn't necessarily thinking about what would fulfill me. I wasn't like obsessing over where I wanted to work. So I don't think I just gave much imagination to it. And then when I got the response, I was like, oh wait, this could actually be kind of sick. Like I assumed that going to fucking boring ass business school, I'd be at some, I don't know, hedge fund or something annoying like that. I didn't think that I'd actually be working for a company whose product I found exciting and I was actual user of. And social media, or in the case of Snapchat at that time, was also like a cool company that I use. So I was like, oh wait, like maybe I could do something that I would consider cool. Like maybe that's a possibility. And then I didn't get the job, but it all worked out. Here we are. Was there ever a moment? Because I think the difference between my story and y'all's is that I've never been someone that's going to settle somewhere where I just don't feel like it, and I never felt like North Carolina was where I would wanted to settle. But I don't think I had like this like aches or aching to like get up and get out as explicit as y'all did. I'm curious, after you made that move to join the military or to Hawaii, did it feel fulfilling? Did you feel like you had scratched the itch, or what's the feeling of when you actually respond to that like spiritual aching to get up and get out?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I told you guys this, and I'll reiterate it here. These past 4.5 years have been I'm gonna stop being dramatic because I don't want people to like pity or like I say things like the worst, the hardest, the most difficult, and I think I don't want anyone listening to be like it's a cry for help, because I'm always gonna be good. But these past 4.5 years have been the worst and most difficult years of my life, but they've been the most meaningful. They've been the most and when I say meaningful, I mean like character development. And I don't really know how to explain it other than the fact that I had to learn a foreign language. I had to deal with a new environment that I'd never been in before. I was following the footsteps of my father, which I don't know why, but there's a lot of nostalgia there. There's a lot of crying on Father's Day because of how difficult my life is. Knowing my father was left by his father and his mother, was orphaned, then sent to his grandmother's house, had no family, couldn't go home when he joined the military, was alone, lonely, met my mom in Korea. Like, so yes, so there's nostalgia there with following my father's footsteps. There's an ache, there's a scratching of the spiritual ache, and there was just like this corresponding to how hard and difficult it is. On the other side of that seesaw that balances it out is a knowing and a reassurance in my soul that I know I did the right thing. What I say a lot to when I talk to people, try to explain when I like get these like spiritual achings or feelings. When I was 25 in North Carolina, I said 36-year-old Kevin is begging me to not stay in North Carolina. 36-year-old Kevin is reaching through the corridors of history, pulling me in and going, you have to listen to us. 36-year-old us, if you stay, is going to be full of regret and miserable. 36-year-old you, if you leave, is going to have the worst loneliness and heartache you've ever felt, but you won't have regret, and there is a difference. So yeah, that spiritual aching was scratched, and I'm in a place now where, although life had never been harder than it had been in the past 4.5 years, one thing I don't have that I know I did the right thing is regret. And I wouldn't trade that for anything.
That's beautiful. And I'll retweet all of that. I can imagine can you imagine? And this is not to say, like, I do think there's something beautiful about you finding fulfillment in the place that you grew up and like wanting to invest. And that's like for you. Like, I'm not trying to diminish that. I think that's beautiful in itself. That being said, can you imagine if you and I were still in Fable at this age? Like, oh.
Sitting in the Taco Bell on Skyboat.
Yes.
Taco Bell at lunch, Pierre was at dinner. On weekends when we wanted to feel fancy. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I didn't have as much angst about moving out of Fayetteville as you two, just because I hadn't been there as long. And I had like left and then, you know what I mean? Like I had a more dispersed time there and it wasn't as long. But I mean, I'm like, I don't know. I feel like I don't exactly frame it the same way. Like I don't even have this alternate version of like, oh, if I had stayed in Fayetteville, XYZ somehow. Like it just, interestingly, like I don't really have that float like haunting me. Like, oh, what if I had done that? Because I just feel like there's not really a version where I would have, and not because I was necessarily trying to escape Fayetteville, but because like in certain things I value, it's like I can't move unless I honor those things. And like I really value like exploration and like new experiences. So it wasn't so much like escaping Fayetteville. It was like, oh, it's just time to like have a new environment. And even like I had really valued in Fayetteville for the first time having the experience of being somewhere a long time, because before that I had moved every 2.5 years. And like, you know, Fayetteville was my first chance to like put down more roots and have friends like you guys who have actually known like now a really long time, which I'd never had before. So yeah. But as we're nearing the end of this episode, I was curious, like, are there moves you guys are making right now, whether they're being manifest or just like internal movements and structuring of your prioritizations and your vision, that like are explicitly related to like what you want to do next, whether you know what that is or not? You know what I mean? Like even if you don't know what it is, like starting to build out frameworks for like what would hold what it is, even if I'm not sure what it is, like, or what would be the wheels that would let that thing take off once I know. And that's a really good question, Leslie.
Okay.
When we're 98 doing this podcast, Leslie is gonna have multiple personalities, and she's literally gonna talk to herself the whole podcast. We're not
taking over the entire podcast.
That's kind of a vibe, though. I'm not mad at that.
And me and Vince are just gonna sit here and stare the whole time.
The answer is definitely yes. I think in general, I'm always thinking of the next steps and what they need to be, and I'm always making moves towards that. I think that's just my personality. I think I did that when I was graduating college and my move out to the West Coast. But I do think where I'm at now, it's kind of that shift I mentioned from the logic of like success and performance being the way I perceive my next steps and getting ready. So like my first few jobs, I would have broke my back. Hopefully my boss isn't listening to this. I would have broke my back, worked until I was dying just to like be successful in my job. Whereas now I feel like I'm more so moving to a place of, okay, what things fulfill me, and moving towards those things is how I define success. So I'm deprioritizing my job a bit and spending time. Like I will choose some of these things over my job, honestly, over even like socializing with people, but knowing that I want to do things like write more or learn more about things. I feel like my time that I spent on that is partly because it's fun for me, but also it's because I'm constantly envisioning myself in 10 years, and not just where I want to be or like what quote unquote job I have, but like how I'm deriving fulfillment and working to put things in place to go towards that person. So I definitely am, probably too much so, probably too obsessively so, but I am.
That makes sense. So the moves you're making for your next step are more so like, rather than the step just being about the career, it's like treating career as a lower prioritized aspect of just like what's the next step in life,
Right.
like you want to be moving toward. Yeah.
Right. So spending time also, like I'm trying to move to DC next year. So spending time just thinking about what that looks like practically, imagining, but also like, again, spending time on things that I enjoy. And I will say, I think I'm a bit fortunate in that because I was unhealthily and like in toxic work environments where I broke my back, I think I have enough stability where I can get away with that. I think there's something to be said about not having that stability that makes it hard for you to kind of move to that mindset. But that's where I am today.
Yeah. I can just quickly piggyback because I have like a related strain of just like, not with the same sense of like, well, I broke my back somewhere and therefore have more financial stability, because obviously when Vincent was talking about the big difference between me and Kevin's stories and his, the big difference is the number 0 after his paycheck.
Yo, talk about it. Hey, we'll never talk about it, but talk about it, Leslie. Say it again. The number of zeros after the comma.
I know military boys not talking.
I know.
We know what stipends you be getting every month.
Because,
how much them shoes got? Never mind. Go ahead.
But yeah, I felt like a positive thing that came out of last year, as difficult as it was that I also felt like I really broke my back, my spirit, and my soul at my job last year. Like truly, just especially the first half of the pandemic was so unhealthy. And it really did, like, don't I just have a line that was drawn for me, and I have a much healthier balance now. And it's just because I'm okay with certain things not being as like good as I would want them. Like if it would take me an extra hour and a half and I haven't eaten dinner, like I'm gonna eat dinner and then I'm probably gonna be too tired to return to it, and it'll have to be as good. You know what I mean? Like, which is really interesting because I do feel like it's not like a less valuing of working hard for a mission I genuinely believe in. It's more just like kind of along the lines of what Vincent is saying, is recognizing like at the end of the day, like this is a job. And like I think that there's like everybody dealt with we even talked about it, I think, on our first episode of this whole podcast, right? Like mental health and emojis. Like I'm pretty sure we talked about that weird conflation of like our work space and our home space. And like, yeah, like it's so hard to just be sitting at the same table, stop working, and then try to transition into some kind of relaxation mode. For sure for me, because of that. And then also just, I think this is probably like a stage of life where once you've had a couple solid jobs under your belt and you have a certain amount of financial security, like you can think about like um life and career in terms of like where it fits in your life, and instead of like career enabling you to have life, because you know you need like money for sustenance and shelter. um but that being the case, I'll say for future me, and we'll see, I feel like where I want to put a lot of my energy, it's interesting because sometimes I can really imagine myself going a more like um stereotypically ambitious, or like I don't know even how to say it, but I could see myself in maybe a little bit more like corporate type environments, but never for long. And I'm like, so I don't think that would be, I think it's going to be more like I really do have so much art that I want to manifest for public sharing, because like it happens in my internal spaces, but I really think my next phase of life, whether like art is incorporated in my actual day job or it's just a job that is still like has a mission I believe in but allows me more like mental space and or actual time, because you know it could still be like same amount of time, but just because of the nature of what it is, it allows me more mental space to um like produce art, right? Like not just like think about it, not just like work through concept, but actually like produce, like go from the beginning to the end and like find places to house it, whether that's writing, whether that's visual art, and like seeking out collectives to participate in. And like, so, you know, that's kind of where I see next. And it feels exciting, like feels like it's time. So
Also say too, this is more to the first thing you were saying, but I think it's like when we talk about like the shifts and how we approach envisioning the future selves, I think it is stability in one sense, but I would almost be sus if we got to this stage of life experience and like we hadn't started shifting the way that we viewed the next step. Like I feel like it's also, and speaking for myself and speaking again kind of to that like performance conversation of like success almost treated like something supernatural or like something that in itself is fulfilling. I think also just getting the experience and understanding that even if you do get even minor markers of success, like they feel good and they can fulfill you to an extent, but they don't necessarily get in the ballpark of answering like what like really fulfills me in the long term like my time spent on earth. And I do think that's another piece too. Just I've had a lot more life experience since graduating college or being a kid, or I know how insufficient it is just to like couch this kind of conversation in the context of just your career. For most people, I mean, if you like at the age of 3 wanted to be, I don't know, an accountant, I think that's weird as fuck, but like sick. Like maybe you will find some sort of fulfillment, like deep fulfillment from your career, but I don't think that's the case for the vast majority of people.
mm, mm.
Yeah, I'm going to say this because I want it for record purposes. And I also, if anyone who is like me before I figured out what I'm going to do next, I want them to be able to see a blueprint. I am going to make poetry like I'm going to put poetry onto the same elevation that comedy and rap music is today, where Netflix is buying every comedy special they can, and rap hip hop music is the biggest genre pop music currently today. And I'm going to do that. The next step, I'm going to do that by acting like a comedian. So like comedians, if they want to get famous, they have circuits, they have comedy clubs, they have the Comedy Store in LA, you have the Improv in Miami, you have all these stores in New York, you have places to go. Poets have open mics. It's not built into a circuit the way comedy is. So yeah, for my next step, like my dream for the past few years, for a long time, has been a performance artist with speaking, like rap at one point, but then for the past few years, it switched to poetry. So then maybe ever since like 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I just knew I wanted to be like a performance poet, spoken word artist, but I couldn't really figure out how to break that mold. And then just recently, I was like, you know what? That's how you do it. So my next step, I'm planning my next step to become a career poet in a year and a half, December 2022, when I get out of the military. And I'm going to do it by going to every open mic that I can, recording all of my pieces, posting them to YouTube. Got a little money in cryptocurrency. Hopefully Ethereum goes up and up, because if it does, I got 2.5 Ethereum. And if it goes to 20,000, I will have $50,000. I was telling a friend this weekend, poetry is the next thing, and there's more after it. So I'm planning for poetry because it's the next step. But I will, as far as I know, I will stick with poetry till the wheels fall off. So I was telling the friend this weekend, that same feeling of a bird can feel an earthquake or a tsunami coming. I was like, hey, I will pour every last penny of my life, literally and emotionally, into this. And if I'm 98, about to die broke, but I spent my entire life trying to hit that target, I won't have a single regret in my life. So that's the next step. That's how I'm going to do it. And we'll see where it goes. And if Ethereum goes up to 20,000, I just want to revisit this conversation. So y'all, Kevin is about to pour $50,000 into poetry because I love it, and it is the passion of my life. And that's what I'm doing next.
Period.
Next step is try till die. I like it.
I fucked yes. Try till die. That like oh my yes.
It rhymes. I don't know if you noticed.
Leslie's a poet. Didn't even know it.
Well, yeah, thanks for joining us, friends, on this little chat about career. Any closing thoughts from you guys that you want our future selves to remember?
I feel like this has been a very, I was gonna say a very personal episode, but in some senses, like we talked about like death, mental health, but I feel like it still feels like an extra personal episode. So
I think
it's an intimate,
like personal details about our actual, you know what I mean? Like not just our thoughts, but like our actual lives. Yeah, that was shared here. Kind of nice to have it mapped out that way.
Awesome. Oh, nothing. Go ahead.
What you was about to say? No, say it.
I was gonna say, because she was like, "Do you want any thoughts to your future self?" And I wanted to say, thoughts to my future self was, everyone, future self, current self, needs you to remember, because you are, that everyone around you, mom, people like in your job space, life made you feel insecure about not staying in the military for 20 years, and you're betting and gambling right now on a fucking
gamble it.
You're gambling on a fucking lottery ticket on lightning striking, but you know because I'm speaking to my future self, 98-year-old self. Thank you for coming back to tell me that you were making the right decision, no matter what society made you feel to be crazy, irresponsible, out of whack, no matter what insecurities you had. Thank you, older self, for coming back to tell me you were right, no matter what people in society made you feel.
Well, thank you for listening. Oh, do you have something, Vincent?
I was trying to think of something to tell myself. Myself is going to be mad when he listens back to it, but I can't think of anything good. Can't wait to meet you.
I know. I tried to think of something like in my mind. I was like, searching around, nothing came. Okay, passing through, like no signals came. Future self, we made it. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Bottomless Podcast. And yeah, we'd love to, as always, hear any thoughts you have. So drop us comments and we'll see you guys next week. Peace. Bottomless.